Welcome to Dark Sorcery. I'm Alfredo Martinez, and I have with me Blair Fox. Blair, it's good to have you on.
Nice to meet you, brother. I'm glad to be here.
Good to meet you too, and it's good to have you on. So yeah, man, you got a lot of interesting content up, and we'll get into that later. But let's go ahead and start out with how did your spiritual journey begin?
Well, on a strictly factual basis, I've always felt different in the regards for a deep need for extraordinaryism. And at a younger age, people didn't really know how to deal with me. I didn't even know how to deal with me. I had, even shamanic dreams. I think when I was 6 years old, my aunt actually had to hire a shaman to shut down my third eye because I was having types of night terrors that they couldn't process. And as the years went by, I had my fair share of supernatural experiences, and I handled them vastly different than other people. And I guess I've always been looking for magic, but I didn't exactly realize, the place that I would be taking in life, especially what's happened to the West over the years. And I guess either the more I was lied to, or the more that I had to seek things on my own, I developed a kind of spiritual anger, which kind of gave me a kind of resilience. And I never stopped looking. By the time I knew what I wanted to do with my life, I just kind of shut myself into one paradigm, because it was the only thing I could think of that would actually lead to my success, no matter how much I had to work towards it. Like, surely enough, if all you're studying is one thing, then it's just a matter of time. And even to this day, I can't really say if there's some great elusive enemy that's manipulating everything, or who knows. But as time goes on, I continue to show resilience to find what I need, and I experience myself in a kind of perpetual growth. On the surface of things, there's a lot of unfortunateness in the social etiquette of it all, but I'm rendered with much satisfaction as time goes on. Yeah.
Did you have a religious upbringing at all?
Yeah, I was raised in a typical Roman Catholic family. But it never, like, none of it clicked. Like, there was no mental reception. It was like I was just there, so to speak. Honestly, I don't even think the energies of that God were even remotely close to me. I never felt anything until Hecate found me after I was like 19. My journey with her started through the deific mask of Selene. And Selene was actually in audio voyant communication with me during my years in Nashville. And right around the time that she left and went on to her own thing is when I started having the visions of Astaria, Phoebe, Diana, and eventually Hecate. And by the time I got to Hecate, everything kind of just became like a sense instead of a sight or a hearing. And I found myself constantly, I guess, not to say with an authority, but compared to other people that claim they have that, it always seemed to be like I was, the one doing the good work, I guess.
Right. You consider yourself an emissary of Hecate, right?
Yes, I do.
So go ahead.
I've had many people say that her energies leak through me even when I'm not paying attention. So, it is what it is.
Yeah. Would you consider that she's the main deity that you tend to work with, or are closest?
Yeah. So from what I've gathered recently, factually, I know that my spirit guides are Selene, Azazel, Hermes, Lucifer, Hecate, Lilith, Asmodee, and Karanzan. But out of all of them, and I have great love and respect, and I'm willing to do service for any of them, but she calls the shots. She is who I'm going. When I pass from this world, it's her service and her word that I follow before any and all others.
Okay, cool. And did you have a religious upbringing?
Yes, I was raised Roman Catholic. Although none of my psychic faculties were active, and I didn't even have so much as a lucid experience. It was, my folks, they had their Holy Spirit or whatever, and I was just there, I guess, until Hecate came into my life at the age of 19. And it was, I guess I've had to find out over time that all the things that I felt as forces within me were very real, because I was not able to function in society until I realized what I was. And I mean, even with relationships, they never last. And I had to realize I show a lot of shamanic signs. Some of the best work that I do is usually when I'm in a state that I can't socialize with people in, but I can intimately associate myself with very other subtle faculties that are much easier to communicate than people. And yeah, I guess at the age of 19, I remember I just everything. I was on my knees, and I just remember I think I was just broken. I just started wailing. Like, well, not even crying. Like, I sounded like a dying seal, and just wailing at the fucking sky. And then, you got the stereotypical religious experience where, the clouds boom in and there's like some magnificent voice actually coming out of the clouds. And that made me realize that, at the time, I didn't experience the plethora of gods available, but it's my first time experiencing something has broken the external barrier to acknowledge me and let me know that I'm there. And that was good enough. Every god knew that this one decides to give a shit about me to such an extent I can auditorily hear it. And I was just like, yes, and then I started having dreams of Celine in what I eventually found out to be Scarlet Woman-like dreams. She had a star dress on. She came to me in the theme of a train station, which showed me, a metropolitan environment. I was still sheltered, living in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. And I took that as a sign to leave. I never really figured out how to grasp my psychic value in currency. So I had to, go with the cards that I had. So I took some money, hopped on a bus at E-Town, Kentucky, and just showed up in Nashville. Barely pocket full of change. I had to learn how to be homeless, and then I had to learn to stay away from homeless people. And, everything kind of fell together over time. I might have mentioned that I had an auditory connection with Celine, where I could, she could communicate with me and I could differentiate my thoughts from hers. And when I first had this experience, like I realized, one of two things are happening to me. Either A, I'm going nuts, or B, something is really talking to me. How do I prove this is real? Well, I should follow the voice. And if it sinks me into a hole, I should probably go seek mental help. And every time I listened to the voice, something happened, like something I couldn't even explain. Like even my first girlfriend that actually loved me was brought to me by Hecate, or Celine rather. And there was a point where Celine stopped communicating with me. I guess it was because I became too reliant, and I didn't realize at the time that what I was experiencing did not make me special. And then, I mean, that was very, very hard for me. Very, actually. It was like it was a repeat of what happened when I was 19. And then I started experiencing the other gifted masks. Astaria, Phoebe, Diana, and eventually Hecate. And by the time I realized that her energies had integrated with me, that's when my life started to really change. And my life to actual service with her started when I started getting visions of places that I'd never been before. At this point, I think it was 2017. I was in a really shitty apartment in barely 920 square foot. And I get this dream of what I eventually find out is a location in Woodland Park, Colorado. So I take off. I just got a truck, and it lasted all the way to St. Louis. And then I had to fly out. And within 4 months after showing up Colorado Springs, I meet this hippie dude named Garrett Wall. And I should get into that too, because that goes into where Kokopelli became my initiator.
Right.
And I didn't know anything about initiations.
Well, before we get into that, let me ask you this. You mentioned about having a Catholic upbringing, which a lot of people who end up on this path, have a similar upbringing. Would you say that the heads of the churches kind of they try to water down the spiritual experience for everybody, so that there's not a strong spiritual connection? I mean, that really they try to limit the potential of the person.
Speaking on an etiquette basis, I think most of the people that think they're empowered are not, and I don't think they even know what they're doing. And even to say that if they do, it's very self-defeating. They limit way too much information. They don't really care for truth. They show great effort to only care for their doctrine, and that is everything where it's all wrong. If anybody could research the Nicene Creed or the Council of the Nicene, and the Gnostics are on that council, and yet even still, they have plenty of time to pay attention to these answers, and they don't care to. I don't know if that's because of the social memory complex, or the people that are abusing the more darker currents, but
Right.
It is what it is. And I mean, I believe that they're useless.
Yeah, I mean, I had a religious upbringing, as you probably noticed from some of my videos, and I also had a bunch of paranormal activity around me, so my direction, I ended up where I am because of that. But it seems that a lot of people who are meant for this path tend to just have more paranormal experiences around them than the average person.
They come and go. I've had probably less than most. I think my first very real paranormal experience was when I was 16, and I was still living with my mom. And my little sister, I remember this like it was yesterday. I was playing Call of Duty Black Ops, smoking weed and shit. My sister's bedroom's right next door. She's like 11 or 13. She got her friend Mackenzie, and they're playing with this littlest pet shops. And all of a sudden, I hear banging and racking, like somebody's like rattling on this, those sliding mirror things.
Yeah.
And I hear them scream. And like before that sound even ended, I had already grabbed my baseball bat, kicked in the door, and they're huddling each other in the corner, and they're just pointing to the window. And I look over, and there's like this humanoid thing, and I can only describe it. Looked like it was made out of shadow of black static. It had piercing red eyes, and it looked like it had diamond claws, but that too was like white static or something. And I'm processing all this like within like maybe 5 seconds, and before those 5 were over, I was out the door with the baseball bat, ran around the corner, and it was gone.
Yeah.
I in that same town, I used to roll with these like delinquent skater kids, and there's this one person that was always obsessed with this road because he said something always happens to somebody on this road. And I go with him, and eventually I look behind me as we're like traveling miles on this road, and there's this mutated ghost mist German Shepherd looking thing. Obviously, like I realized it's a hellhound, and it was running at me, but it looked at like to my eyes, it looked really slow. By the time I blinked, it was like dum dum and getting really close. And I screamed like a bitch. I fucking ran.
It's crazy because I've seen things similar to that as well, and I think a lot of people just don't know what's out there. I mean, there is other species out there. A lot of times the spirit world would, you'll catch glimpses of that stuff. But man, it's crazy. It's crazy. But you had mentioned that. Go ahead.
Oh, I've always had this sense of wanderlust about me. I can't explain it, but I feel like I truly am here for them, not for people. I feel like I'm here for the beings that exist in the veil. There's a kind of intimacy. I might start crying actually. There is something that I can't explain that just I would go as far as like I get them. I believe anyway. And it's their approval that I ultimately seek. I don't know what my future holds. I'm gonna study until the day I die, but I've always kind of wanted to be a diplomat for that. I feel like, a lot of people, we go around asking ourselves what exactly is real work. And I feel like when I have the skills to provide for their needs, taking value from what used to be in the old world, the ancient Celtic Druids, I feel like that's at least the beginning of real service.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, we're all here for a reason, and definitely spiritual. But if you can feel that in your spirit, then yeah, man, I think that is true. But you had mentioned about someone had come into your life that was special before I had cut you off earlier.
Refresh my memory.
You had mentioned that someone had come into your life, and you were about to say something, and then I kind of cut you off. But maybe it'll come back. But
Okay.
did you as you were growing up and your spiritual journey was kind of evolving, did any occult books or spiritual books inspire you?
The very, very first book was something that had actually been in my family. Not every, but like the last three women in the generation all had a copy of the same book. So that was kind of what brought me in, and it was To Ride a Silver Broomstick by Silver Ravenwolf. And I mean, still to this day, I mean, I'm not Wiccan anymore, but if there was going to be any kind of coven I would join, I would like to think that the Dark Forest clan definitely up my alley. Like, I really love the way hedge witches handle their paradigms.
Okay.
And it just kind of went from there. I wound up getting the rest of Silver Raven stuff, and I had the whole like Da Vinci experience. Like when I realized that everything I'm reading is a very real thing. I tried to spread the word. I thought people just don't know what they're missing. I had to find out the hard way. They don't care.
Yeah, it's. I think it comes down to how bad do you want? How bad do you want it? You know what I mean? Some people are very passionate about it. If you're not passionate enough, some people may just dabble and that's about it. You know what I mean? But yeah, let me ask you this. Now, some people, a lot of their spiritual growth comes from books, and then I've met some people who didn't even read any books and they just watched online videos and learned from there. What would you say is appeals more to you, or is more effective, reading spiritual books, or just learning online videos and courses, that type of thing?
Well,
What's the pros and cons in your eyes between the two?
Well, so first of all, I turned to the ways of scholarship because one of the first real skills I was experiencing was claircognizance. And you can imagine what kind of problems that would have caused. So yeah. I had to put myself in a situation to affirm what was already in my head. And I would find out, let's say a name pops up in my head and I look it up on Google and there it is. And so I had to perpetuate myself in study. And as far as like what's more important, that's entirely based on what kind of work you're here to do. If you're spiritual, then you don't need anything except yourself. And if you're an occultist, then you're probably gonna be indoctrinated through some kind of tradition. But if the arcane arts themselves are the path, then you are demanded to know what you're doing, or you will surely suffer the consequences of it. And that kind of discipline definitely requires constant study, because people lie, people gatekeep. Most often than not, most of these people in this lifestyle do not have any respect for the ways of the gods. And right. So that's even more of a reason why we should study. And by perpetual study, that's the only way we're going to get back to the way of the old world.
Yeah. And I mean, I've, most of my knowledge comes from books. I've read lots of books, worked through them. But like I said, I've known some people who have not read any spiritual books, and they just watch some videos and they catch on. But I will say this is that reading lots of books expanded my vocabulary. And as a result of that, I know what are the right questions to ask. So, whether that be, go ahead.
Let's look at this from like a mental mechanics kind of thing. I'm sure right. You know by now that the human mind is like kind of a quantum computer. All these chains, all these connections to things, and because of the various psyops and things in the world, we can very easily be manipulated from our answers by very subtle things that we might not even know is there. And that's where fanatics like me come in, because those of us that are resilient, only one paradigm, only one culture, when you perpetuate this and you're constantly pumping your subconscious, you're clockwork oranging yourself, right? Surely all these background chain connectors, they're in the right place. So you're going to find yourself experiencing a constant subtle affirmation, so to speak, that you're well on your way. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No. I see what you're meaning. It's like kind of like it'll put the gears in the right place.
Yes.
So like take for instance, reading lots of books, like I said, expanded my vocabulary and gave me a better idea of what questions to ask, whether it's to a person, a mentor, in a library, or even on Google. So like there's times when, I've read something and maybe a year goes by and I don't quite understand a few passages that were said. So then I because of the strong vocabulary and all the knowledge from the books and the discipline of reading and scholarship, I know what question to ask on Google that will help paraphrase and give me the right answer. Say, okay, aha, I get it now. You know what I mean?
So what I'm going to say to that, to the viewers, you might not like this answer, but disillusionment is the only way forward. I knew this before I even knew what I was talking about on the matter. When I was 16 years old, same year where all that stuff started happening, I had this epiphany that I started to realize, because also I didn't know the implicative definitions of things like belief. You come to find out that a lot of the schisms in this life are entirely based on the definition implied of words, and people do not definitively regard these words. And when people speak in context to the word defined, not necessarily you get what I'm saying. And so if you got into something like transliterization, which is more like it's an art that is relative to numerology, but it's implied in the characters of letters. So each character of each letter is like pre-definitive. It all represents a kind of expression. You get to the point where you can define the word as you're speaking it because you know what each character means.
Right.
And so right now, you come from the perspective that, okay, belief is the human divine ability to co-create the actualized reality. And so, this is the point in my life where I realized nobody gives a shit about what I believe. And as long as I'm coming off with an opinion, nobody's going to listen to me. And honestly, I've gotten as far as I have probably from a lot of productive hatred. I've dealt with a lot of hate for the misunderstandings of things. And, I don't like losing.
Yeah, we all dealt with hate, man. It's all good.
And so, that's when the experience hit me. It's like, okay, well, this is probably the right experience, because who am I? How the fuck? I don't know what the hell is going on. Well, how do I know anything? So it's like, okay, if what I believe or have an opinion doesn't matter, then the world can show me what it is. And I didn't realize this at the time, but, the value that I took upon me that night was exactly how Karanzan wound up being my spirit guide. And, this is years before I even know what a Karanzan is, or what an abyss is. And yet I'm subconsciously giving off abyssic qualities. And, by the time I got into the mystic missionary services where, I'm traveling and running my mouth and shit, this is the point where I'm catalyzing people just by talking to them. I've basically ran my mouth to every human I've ever walked past. And I found out over time that everybody I've talked to, I've acted as some kind of like gate initiator or something, because so many years later, some of those people got back and touched me. Every single one of them is studying magic now. So it was a serious wake-up call for me.
Right on, man. Now, You mentioned something on one of your videos, and this kind of stood out to me. You said money comes from the fracturing of soul essence. Can you
Yeah,
explain that a bit more?
I got that information from Universal Mastery, and we've had a couple of conversations about that guy, but he started off in a service that honestly we all needed, and it's unfortunate that whatever happened to him, whether he chose to not do that anymore or if something happened to him. But he used to make it his business to teach all of the dark secrets that you weren't going to get from just reading a grimoire. You had to waste half your life in some order, spend so much money for them to be like, oh yeah, you got so many ranks up with us. Oh, everything we just taught you was wrong. You got to learn this shit. So that's he used to say that the black magicians of the world, they have all this currency because of this factor, that currency itself it's related to the transmigration of souls. And so every soul that incarnates on this planet, we know that, pre-incarnation, we give up part of our power. And then that could even extend into the whole twin flame phenomena, how as you're incarnating, the souls divide and they incarnate, but then after you incarnate, the birth certificate thing. All
Right.
All societal stipulations of the birth certificate are actually a lucifugic contract. You don't know this, and neither does the parent when they're signing away this name that
Yeah,
assumes the right.
you had mentioned something about the number on the top right of your birth certificate.
Yeah, that's the strongman serial number, and that's connected to the lucifuge contract as well. So, right, the contract, whoever made up this system, probably made a deal with Lucifer, or however that works, right? And so you're unwillingly consenting to basically your right, or your heir to a universal basic currency, and you're giving that up. And this is how this currency perpetuate, how these people have all this money, because they're taking it from you. And this is where we learn in the darker stuff that it's a man's world, and whether you like it or not, you might need to do some things that you don't agree with if you want to get there. And so the information was quite a wake-up call, because I've always had the ability to catch on to knowledge, and with a foundation in hermetics, you kind of understand that knowledge is the greatest treasure. Because of all this stuff, I actually thought I was going to make my way in the world by just resiliently studying old skills in the old world, trying to basically hack reality to where, fuck this money, I don't need this, I can build whatever I want. And I mean, that's not necessarily the wrong way of thinking, but that's definitely handicapping yourself to an
Yeah.
extent. And so yeah, so money is exactly that. It's perpetuated by the soul fracturing of the collective. And this is also why you usually don't experience wealth until you find yourself, or as most people successfully cross the abyss, and then suddenly they find themselves in a state of abundance. It's regaining your lost power.
Interesting take on it. Interesting take. Now, you also mentioned about
You froze.
Nazis in the occult. Go ahead.
There we go. Never mind. You froze a little bit. Yeah,
No.
if you want to talk about the Nazi thing, I'm sure you've heard me say that my brain kind of works at a center dynamic of going both ways.
Right.
And I've always kind of known, based on what we learned in high school, that what made the Nazis terrifying was that they were the first world government to openly utilize occult science. And a lot of people are gonna have their opinions, but right, the government doesn't make it its job to tell you, oh, this is what makes them scary. No, it's their job to make you look like an idiot and then write what they want. And learning about the more extraterrestrial origins of this reality, if you dig deep enough, it doesn't take too hard to realize that Hitler wasn't Hitler. Hitler was created. Somebody manipulated the fuck out of this guy, and he fell for it. The Holocaust was nothing more than an indication that he knew that one of the main bloodlines on this planet that is trying to kill us all stems from a Jewish bloodline. And back then, who could stipulate, which one is which?
Now
And
that's not to say anything negative about Jews or any Jews who may be watching this.
No, no, of course not. I mean, back when I was following spirit science, they used to say that there's a Hebrew bloodline that comes from an alternate reality, for us. And I believe that spirit science called it. He just referred to them as the Hebrews. And we eventually find out that the great enemy, as Hitler thought, was the Sanhedrin bloodline. And based on my research, I don't know if every Sanhedrin is this. I can't even say that I'm a master at understanding, the background of celestial genetics, but I can definitely say that Hitler was manipulated, and whoever manipulated him is the same one pulling the strings to this day.
Yeah, there's talk about how extraterrestrial, blood gets into this whole thing if you dig down the rabbit hole deep enough, that type of thing. But yeah, man, that could be something for a whole nother conversation. But
Yeah.
but yeah, man, you also mentioned about the swastika, and how it's kind of like the flower of life. Like, it could be an ancient symbol of pi. Can you explain that?
Did I say that?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. If I did, that's probably correct. There's a lot of things that come subconsciously, but
Right.
I remember that the correspondences to the flower of life, every sacred symbol that stems from sacred geometry, we're talking over 1,000 different symbols, are all in the flower of life. And the swastika, oh, that's why I said it was pi, because it's the same shape as the fourfold Fibonacci spiral. And right, originally the swastika had something to do with spiritual harmony. The actual context eludes me at this moment, but I don't exactly know why Hitler changed it, but I can imagine that it probably was to manipulate its implication of harmony. Maybe this is just speculation, but let's say the right way that it is to suggest harmony of the world. Maybe he did sideways to be harmony of his supremacy. Who knows?
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say no doubt that when you look at the Nazis and their connection to the occult, that they had to have had some kind of interdimensional assistance as far
I
as
mean,
pointing them in the right direction.
I could agree with you, but I could also suggest, did they? They were intelligent because they realized some of them might have to be monstrous to actually get sufficient research, and they didn't care what they needed to do. That's
Right.
what really made them
Well,
scary.
they're looking at everything from a spiritual lens, whereas other governments may or may not.
Yeah, and
From an occultic lens.
and that's probably the only thing about them that deserves respect is they knew reverence.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Yeah, exactly. And you had mentioned something about your thoughts are at the meridian between two dynamics. How you can
yeah,
tell someone. Yeah, go ahead and explain that a little bit.
I mean, how can I? I only care for the truth, and in that regard, I have to be willing to be wrong. And so you have two polarities in your body, which means you have two ways of looking at things at any point in time.
Yeah.
None of the things I've ever done is based on my personality. I'd even go as far as to say that you've played the game Skyrim, right?
I'm not too familiar with that.
Okay. So reason I bring that up is there's a skill in there called speech, and when you're in certain
Okay.
dialogues while playing the game, you have
Right.
the option to persuade or intimidate somebody. And you'll notice sometimes persuasion works or it doesn't. And when persuasion doesn't work, you can intimidate them, and it will work. And it's kind of like that. It's you're rendered. Okay, what do I have to do to get this? What's happening here? How do I approach this? Like, okay, let's be civilized. Okay, that didn't work. Try punching them in the face. Oh, look, that worked. Okay, next.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
it's all about what do you have to do to get to the next part.
Mm.
And and that's kind of where the dynamic thing comes in. And on a more general basis, right, you have these two undercurrents on where you're going to be disillusioned to what is, but then you're going to have your opinions on what you think it is. Based on which direction you go is going to determine what door opens or closes. And that's why I say, I'll even go as far as to say, like, we've all been arrested before. I've been in jail a couple times. And there's a lot of the ways these people act that just is completely phantom to me. And, you know, I will not engage in violence unless I actually know why am I being violent. I've almost been killed 3 times in my life, and that's also because, like, my faculties would not allow me to defend my integrity until I knew why I was doing it. And when you give yourself to like that force, you know, it's like, you know, it's like a big bang goes off inside you. You know, once that part of you awakens, there's no turning it off. And if you are responsible in any sense of the word, you do not want that part of you to be calling the shots, because a lot of innocent people, or even people that are just, you know, guilty of some arrogance, you might be hurting a lot of people that don't need to be hurt. And that's where I lead, you know, where it goes in 2 different directions. And in the modern day, right, that inside me manifests as a constant reflection. Like, well, was this the right thing? What did this lead to? Was this the right thing? What did that lead to? Right. And then, you know, is the center where I have the 2 sides eventually kind of meet in the center. And that's usually how I know it is probably the correct course of action.
Okay. Right on. And in closing, if you could go back and give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
Don't stop, no matter what they do, and no matter what you think.
Okay. Right on, man. Now, for those who are watching, make sure you check out Blair's social media. Make sure you check him out on TikTok. He's got a lot of good stuff on that. He's also got an Instagram page, and I'll have his social media links below in the video description. Make sure you check those out. Blair, thank you for your time. Did you want to mention something?
Yeah, I would like to speak to the public briefly.
Yeah, go ahead.
To those of you who have magic in your heart, you will find what you need from me. And if you're just getting into this, be careful not to trust when I'm acting like the jester, because there are people in this world that will hurt you for what you know. And in public, this is all a game. In the end, it is what you know and what you're willing to understand. And that is the only thing that matters. Do not stop, and you will find what you need eventually.
It's very deep, man.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to the possibility of having this again, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity you've given me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and you're always welcome back too. So, like I said, everyone watching, check out his social media links below, and everyone watching, make sure you like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery.